Dell Computer, Mondelez International, and Vested Outsourcing. Well, joining us to speak about that today is Kate Vitasek on the faculty of the University of Tennessee's Center for Executive Education. Well, Kate, it's good to see you once again. How are you?
Fantastic, Russell.
Kate, good news. I'm told there is a brand new case study in the latest edition of your book on vested outsourcing with Dell Computer. So let us in on that. What's it all about? Give us a preview before we actually receive the book and read it.
It is hot off the presses, actually, so, and we will get you a copy. But the first edition of our book, Vested Outsourcing, 5 Rules That Will Transform Outsourcing, is in its 11th printing, and it earned a second edition.
So congratulations.
And when it earns second edition, you are supposed to put in new material. And we are so excited to add the Dell case study, because Dell was one of the first companies to actually follow the vested methodologies that we wrote and codified in the Vested Outsourcing Manual. And they chose to do that with their partner Genco ATC in reverse logistics. You know, Dell's always been known for innovation in supply chain, and reverse logistics sometimes the stepchild. So can you innovate in reverse logistics? And you've got a partner that you've been with for 8 years, I believe it was. And how do you drive innovation into a relationship that is perceived to have been complacent, hit a brick wall with regards to cost? You know, if you ask Dell, they'd say, you know, every dollar every year, and Genco goes, there is no more dollars, the low-hanging fruit's been picked, we need to plant a tree. You know, so how do you break that paradigm?
I understand then that this is going to show an innovation in this relationship, a new wrinkle there, right? This is going to be clearly something people want to read about because, of course, Dell, as you say, not only has been an innovator in the field, but still continues to be a very large and impressive company. Same with Genco ATC. I want to turn to Mondelez International, another company that you've been working with, a major multi-million-dollar food manufacturer, and relationship it has with 3 of its 3PLs, Excel, Schenker, and Ryder. And let's talk about the vested outsourcing relationship that they have there. What can you tell us about it?
Go back and compare and contrast Dell with Mondelez. Dell, one buyer, one supplier. A set, defined scope, reverse logistics. In Mondelez's case, their foray into vested was with 3 suppliers. And if you look at their network and how vast they are, I think they're a $36 billion company. How do they take that network and optimize that across the best of the best suppliers? So one supplier, they could argue, can't manage their entire network. Or even if they could manage it, business continuity maybe not be smart for them to do that. So they have chosen to select 3 suppliers to go through the vested outsourcing process. So taking their network, streamlining that to 3, and choosing a partnership approach, a highly collaborative vested business model. So taking those 3 suppliers and together making them one team, one purpose through the vested methodology. And very different, also in Mondelez's case, that is very strategic. They're forward logistics. That's not something you can mess up with. You pilot vested and reverse logistics, you have a little bump. Who cares, right? Here, forward logistics is the crown jewels, and you're shipping to companies like Walmart. You got to get that right. But what is fascinating, Russell, is that the methodology works. It works with one buyer, one supplier, one buyer, 3 suppliers. It works in logistics. In our other case study book, which you've interviewed me on, facilities and real estate management, the nonprofit sector, obviously McDonald's and their supply chain. So it is a methodology that, when followed, Dell actually, my favorite quote from the Dell case study is, an innovation pinata appeared out of nowhere. Isn't that beautiful?
Love it.
It is. You know, the methodology allows you to provide the focus and rules. You know, vested is about the 5 rules. And if we don't play by the rules, aren't we cheating? And that's what happens as we get into these buyer-supplier relationships and we begin to cheat, and we don't even know that we're cheating. We don't realize that we're not following the rules, and we're sub-optimizing that relationship. So by working and following the methodology, we create focus for that relationship. We create rules, and instead of tugging back and forth and fighting against each other or playing that game against each other. The buyer and the supplier play the game together against the problem.
But let's look at this a little bit more closely. You just mentioned the difference between, of course, forward and reverse logistics. True. Difference between these two case studies, if you will. One of them dealt with one supplier. Here we're dealing with a shipper dealing with three. And so my question to you is, how does one convince all of these parties to jump in and take a chance? Because it's difficult enough to do that to have a collaborative relationship with one party. Now we've got three.
Yeah.
How do you do that?
And you know, you used a simple little phrase there, jump in. Many times we hear people reference, I'm going to hold hands and we're going to jump off the cliff, right? Because it is a leap of faith. They have not had these type of relationships before. They have not built the trust that they need to have these types of relationships. So one of the tools in our toolkit is a compatibility and trust assessment. Really taking and providing a 360 view of that relationship and how the softer side of that relationship is working or not working, right? So now you can change the discussion. You know, another tool that we have in our toolkit is called a deal review. And we look at the contract and we show people that not playing by the rules is creating perverse incentives. And they feel those perverse incentives. They feel measurement minutia, the driving blind disease, or the outsourcing paradox, or one that the suppliers really hate is the junkyard dog syndrome, right, where you're micromanaging the supplier. I tell you I'm going to outsource to the experts and then tell you how to do the work. That's obscene, right? And I think you heard on the Mondelez when you interviewed them, they talked about, Excel talked about the handcuffs. And they want to come to work and do a good job, but they're put in a box. And that innovation is outside the box. So they're told to think outside the box, but they're not paid outside the box. Their governance structure doesn't enable them to be outside the box. And so all the mechanisms of that deal structure, while you say you want innovation, don't enable it.
Right.
And that's what the methodology does, is it unlocks that, as in Dell's words, the innovation pinata through a methodology.
Okay, let's return to trust for just a moment. You mentioned it a moment ago. It did come up in the interview that I've done with Mondelez International and with the three supply chain partners. The question is, isn't that something that we talk about but are actually reluctant to actually engage in? Because everything is about control the process, and yet here you're talking about trusting another partner. So how do you get them to do that?
Well, it's actually part of the methodology, and you start by creating a shadow of the future. So where could we go together? So today we sit here and we bicker back and forth. We're in a value exchange relationship. We've got an orange and we both want the orange, right? And so to be creative, you get the peel and I get the pulp. Well, we're still fighting over the orange. And so what Vesta does is it changes the lens and puts you cast what's called a shadow of the future on the partnership. So the buyer will commit to the supplier and say, I'm going to commit to you a long-term relationship. In Dell's case, I'm going to move forward. I'm not going to bid this out. Wow, did you just tell me you're not going to bid this work out? You're going to commit to me? Wow, that's building trust, right? So you look for trust building moves. And so I lead with trust, you follow with trust. I lead with trust, you follow with trust. You lead with trust, I follow. So you want to inject trust building maneuvers into the relationship. And once you start to do that, it's amazing how fast that deal turns around. The problem is they haven't ever learned to play by the rules and build those trust building behaviors. They don't know what they are. And actually, some of our procurement policies purposely detract from trust building, right? Every dollar, every year. I don't care that we had a 3-year deal. I'm going to renegotiate. That was that year's deal. This is this year's deal. Not to say that we don't want to focus on cost, and we need to drive down cost, but you just reneged on me. Or you want me to bring innovation, and you're going to bid me out next year. Why would I bring you my best idea when I know at the end of my contract, you're going to bid me out.
And but the question is that they're asking is, how do I know I'm going to get value next year because of what I'm afraid that you're going to do to me? So how do you answer that?
So that is something that the buyer and the suppliers, or in Mondelez's case, the suppliers, create together. They define what value is together. And now they are vested in the success of that. Because when they plant that orange tree and they harvest the oranges, either 1 orange or 10 orange, or it could be none, right? But they're in it together. They are absolutely in it together. So a what's in it for me mindset, and you're moving to a what's in it for we mindset. You're casting that shadow of the future. How many oranges can we? Why don't we take the time and invest in the relationship so that we can harvest more oranges, right? And a lot of people think, well, that sounds really great, but, and a lot of times they are skeptics.
Final question. I don't know if this has to do with skepticism or negativity, but I suppose some people would say, I'd like to have some type of an opt-out clause, or how do I get out of a relationship like this if it doesn't work for me? Well, what would you tell them?
Well, actually, one of the elements of governance. Again, we move from we have an insight versus an oversight governance structure, and so one of the elements is an exit management plan. I like to laugh. If you have a strategic partnership, Russell, you don't have a 30-day term of convenience. You have, I'm committed to you, but I can fire you in 30 days. Right? And so we move away from that and have an exit management plan. McDonald's does it better than anyone I've seen. So they have very long-term, actually no contracts. So they assume that those suppliers, those strategic suppliers, are going to be partners. They don't want to fire those partners. So they co-create a plan to win. And if the supplier isn't adding value towards the plan to win, right? So I'm here today and I want to go to the plan to win. The plan to win is over time, right? And if the supplier isn't moving up to the plan to win, in essence, they fire themselves. Think about that. I'm not adding value to the future. I'm not innovating. I'm not lowering the cost structure. I've committed to the plan to win with you. We've co-created that. I don't add that value. I didn't follow my bargain, and I fire myself.
Not only have I let you down, but of course I've let myself down as well.
Absolutely. I have one last story. I want to tell you a little snippet from the Dell case study because this just absolutely fascinates me. We talk about skepticism and should we do this? For Dell, this was a big deal. Should we move into these types of relationships? And one of the things that the procurement group did was create a book club. And every week they read a different chapter. So the book is 10 chapters. Now it's 12 chapters because we added the Dell chapter, right? But so it was 10 chapters. And each week they read a book and someone from the procurement group would lead that discussion. And chapter 3 is the ailments, the 10 elements. And they read that and they said, oh my gosh, we have all these ailments. We are sick. Our relationship is sick. And as they got in and unfolded, are they playing by the rules? They asked themselves, no, we're not. We're cheating. Are we setting the right foundation? No, we didn't. What's our governance structure look like? It's not. And so, in essence, they convinced themselves over the course of the 10 weeks that vested was the right approach. And through that, they gave the book to Genco ATC, their partner, and said, I want you to explore this because we're committed if you're committed. We will lead with trust if you will trust us that this is the right methodology.
We're in this together. I like that story. I also like what I'm hearing about the new information of Dell, so I'm looking forward to seeing my copy of the book.
Absolutely.
That's Kate Vitasek, University of Tennessee's Center for Executive Education, speaking with us today about Dell, Mondelez International, and vested outsourcing. Well, thank you for watching.